Captain Jake Morrison stared at the view screen as his ship, the Terra Nova, drifted through space. Stars filled the darkness like scattered diamonds. He had led this mission for 6 months now, taking humanity farther from Earth than anyone had ever gone before. His crew of 42 people trusted him to bring them home safely. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Lisa Grant from her position at the tactical station. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls. 2 ships about 3 million kilometers away. One is chasing the other. Jake walked over to look at her screen. "Can you tell what kind of ships they are?" "Never seen anything like them before," Lisa replied. "The one being chased is smaller and looks damaged. The bigger one is huge, maybe 10 times our size." Dr. Amy Carter looked up from her science station. "Captain, I'm reading life signs from both ships. The smaller one has about 50 beings aboard. The larger ship has maybe 200. Pete Sullivan, the chief engineer, whistled softly. "That big ship is armed to the teeth. I count at least 30 weapon ports on the side facing us." Jake felt his stomach tighten. This was what Earth's leaders had feared when they sent the Terra Nova out here. They were not alone in the universe, and first contact might not be peaceful. "The big ship just fired," Lisa announced. "The smaller one's shields are failing." On the main screen, they watched as bright energy beams struck the smaller vessel. Parts of its hull began to glow red-hot. The ship shuddered and slowed down. "They're being boarded," Pete said, reading his instruments. The big ship just attached itself to the smaller one. Jake made a decision that would change everything. "Move us closer, but keep us hidden behind that asteroid. I want to see what happens." The Terra Nova crept forward until they had a clear view of both alien ships. Through the transparent sections of the smaller vessel, they could see the boarding action taking place. Tall reptilian creatures in dark armor were herding smaller blue-skinned beings into groups. "My God," Amy whispered. "Those big ones look like walking dinosaurs." The reptilian aliens stood at least 12 feet tall. Their scales were dark green, almost black, and their armor made them look even more threatening. They moved with deadly grace like predators who had never known fear. "Captain, I'm translating their communications," said Ryan Brooks from the communication station. "The universal translator is starting to work. The big aliens call themselves Kethvar. The blue ones are called Veltar." Jake watched in horror as one of the Kethvar pointed at a group of Veltar prisoners. Without warning, it raised a weapon and fired. 5 of the blue aliens fell dead. "They're executing prisoners," Lisa said, her voice tight with anger. The lead Kethvar, who wore different armor than the others, spoke into a communication device. Ryan's translation came through the speakers. "I am Commander Zekthul of the Kethvar Empire. You Veltar insects thought you could escape our hunting grounds. This is what happens to prey that runs from predators. Half of you will die as an example. The rest will serve the Empire as slaves." More Kethvar soldiers raised their weapons. Jake saw terror in the eyes of the remaining Veltar. Some were clearly children clinging to what must have been their parents. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "we have to do something. If we reveal ourselves, we put Earth at risk," Jake replied, but his hands were clenched into fists. "These aliens could follow us home. And if we do nothing, we're no better than the ones pulling the triggers," Lisa added. Pete looked up from his station. "Captain, their weapons are energy-based, but their shields work on a different frequency than ours. I might be able to punch through them if we get close enough." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his wife Sarah back on Earth and their 2 children. He thought about the 8 billion people who had no idea that monsters like the Kethvar existed. But he also thought about the terrified families on that ship, about to be murdered or enslaved. When he opened his eyes, his decision was made. Red alert. "All hands to battle stations. Pete, charge all weapons. Lisa, plot an intercept course. Ryan, prepare to broadcast on all frequencies." "What should the message say?" Ryan asked. "Tell them to stop. Tell them that if they want to fight, they can have one." The Terra Nova dropped its stealth mode and accelerated toward the Kethvar ship. Jake knew it was probably a death sentence for his crew, but he could not watch innocent beings die without trying to help. Commander Zekthul was about to order another execution when his tactical officer hissed in alarm. "Commander, unknown vessel approaching at high speed. It appears to be attacking." Zekthul looked at the screen with interest rather than concern. "What species is it?" "Unknown, Commander. I've never seen this ship design before." "How amusing. New prey has come to rescue old prey. Prepare to capture the vessel intact. I want to interrogate these newcomers." But Zekthul's amusement faded when the human ship did something unexpected. Instead of attacking head-on like proper predators, it flew in a spiraling pattern that made it hard to target. Its weapons fired in short bursts, hitting weak points in the Kethvar ship's armor that no one had ever targeted before. "Impossible," Zekthul snarled. "How do they know where to hit us?" On the Terra Nova, Amy Carter was scanning the Kethvar ship with every sensor they had. "Captain, their armor is strongest at the front and sides, but there are weak points where the different sections connect. If we can hit those joints, do it," Jake ordered. Lisa fired the ship's weapons with surgical precision. The Kethvar ship shuddered as its armor began to fail in places no enemy had ever struck before. But the human ship was taking damage too. The Kethvar weapons were more powerful, and several hits had damaged the Terra Nova's engines. "Captain, we can't take much more of this," Pete reported. Jake made another impossible decision. "Ram them. Target their docking tube. We're going to free those prisoners." The Terra Nova accelerated directly at the Kethvar ship. At the last second, Jake ordered all power to the forward shields. The human ship struck the connection between the two alien vessels, separating them. In the confusion that followed, many of the Veltar prisoners escaped to their damaged ship. But the collision had also left the Terra Nova crippled. Worse, several Kethvar soldiers had boarded during the impact. Jake heard fighting in the corridors as his crew battled the alien boarders. When the smoke cleared, they had won, but at a cost. 5 crew members were dead, and 3 others, including Ryan Brooks, had been captured when the Kethvar ship retreated. As Jake watched the alien vessel disappear into hyperspace, he knew that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone, and they had just made enemies of a species that seemed to rule by fear and violence. The Veltar ship's captain, an elderly being who introduced himself as Flowing Through Depths, spoke to Jake through the translator. "You have saved our lives, but you have also doomed your species. The Kethvar Empire rules this galaxy. They will come for your world with 1,000 ships. Why did you help us?" Jake looked at the alien captain and gave the answer that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. "Because it was the right thing to do." Commander Zekthul stood in the medical bay of his warship, watching as the Kethvar neural interrogator worked on the human prisoner. Ryan Brooks hung unconscious in the machine, his mind being read like an open book. "What do you see?" Zekthul asked the technician. "Strange, Commander. This species thinks differently than any we have encountered. They call themselves humans. Their home world has 8 billion of them." Zekthul's eyes widened. 8 billion was a massive population for any species. Are they warriors? That is the strange part. Most of them are not fighters at all. They spend their time growing food, building things, creating art. Yet this one fought us to save complete strangers. The technician continued reading Ryan's memories. "Commander, you need to see this. Their planet's location is here in his mind, along with detailed information about their defenses." Zekthul studied the data flowing across the screen. Earth seemed like an easy target. The humans had only recently developed space travel and had no experience with galactic warfare. But something bothered him about the way they had fought. "Send a message to High Command," he ordered. "Tell them we have discovered a new species. Large population, primitive technology, but they fight in ways that do not make sense." 3 days later, Zekthul stood before the Supreme Hierarch Vector in the throne room of the Empire's capital ship. The massive chamber was designed to intimidate, with the bones of defeated species decorating the walls. "Tell me about these humans," Vector commanded. His voice echoed through the chamber like rolling thunder. "They are defective predators, Supreme One. They have the intelligence to be apex hunters, but they waste it protecting the weak. Their ship attacked us not for territory or resources, but to save prey animals they had never met before." Vector leaned forward on his throne, made from the skull of some ancient beast. "Defective how?" "They sacrifice themselves for non-relatives. They retreat not from fear but as part of complex strategies. They fight as a group instead of proving individual dominance. It makes them unpredictable." "But you defeated them?" "Yes, Supreme One, but with more difficulty than expected. They found weaknesses in our armor that proper predators would never look for. They think like prey but fight like pack hunters." Vector considered this information. 8 billion of them, you said? Even defective predators in such numbers could be useful. Prepare the 3rd hunting fleet. We will harvest this species for slaves and study their strange behaviors. What of their unpredictability? Prey is prey, Commander. Once they see our full might, they will submit like all the others. Meanwhile, the Terra Nova limped back toward Earth with its Veltar passengers. Jake Morrison sat in his ready room with Flowing Through Depths, learning about the galaxy's true situation. "Your species has ruled for 3,000 years?" Jake asked, trying to understand the scope of the Kethvar Empire. "The Kethvar conquered my people 2 centuries ago," the Veltar elder explained through the translator. "Before that, they destroyed the crystal singers of Shardhai, enslaved the insect minds of Rikaka, and scattered the light beings of Lumha. Every species that has encountered them has fallen. But surely someone has fought back. Many have tried. The Kethvar are not just brutal. They are efficient. They study each species and find the most effective way to break them. Some they exterminate as examples. Others they keep as slaves. A few they allow to live as tributaries, paying tribute in exchange for survival." Jake felt sick. How many species have they conquered? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. They have turned war into a science. Each victory makes them stronger. Dr. Amy Carter entered the room. "Captain, I've been studying the data we gathered from their ship. The Kethvar are perfect predators, but that might also be their weakness." "What do you mean?" "Predators think in certain patterns. They focus on the hunt, on dominance, on individual strength. They don't understand cooperation the way prey species do. Look at Earth's history. Most of our greatest achievements came from working together, not from individual dominance." Flowing Through Depths made a sound that the translator interpreted as agreement. "Your species did something no other has done. You chose to fight for strangers. The Kethvar cannot understand this behavior." The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks. During that time, the crew worked with their Veltar passengers to learn everything they could about Kethvar tactics and technology. They also learned about other species in the galaxy. "There are survivors hiding in dead systems," Flowing Through Depths explained. "Refugees from destroyed worlds, rebels who refuse to submit. They survive by staying hidden and moving often. Could they be allies?" Lisa Grant asked during one of their planning sessions. "Perhaps, but they have been beaten so many times that hope is nearly dead among them. They would need to see a real victory against the Kethvar before they would risk fighting again." When the Terra Nova finally reached Earth, Jake found a world transformed by fear. The news of alien contact had leaked and panic was spreading. Some groups demanded immediate surrender to avoid destruction. Others called for total war. Admiral Kevin Stone met Jake at the space dock. "Morrison, the president, wants a full briefing in 1 hour. The entire Security Council is waiting." In the briefing room, Jake stood before the most powerful people on Earth and delivered news that changed everything. "The Kethvar Empire controls most of this section of the galaxy. They have the technology to destroy our civilization, and based on what we learned from their prisoner, they're planning to invade within 6 months. President Martinez looked pale. "What are our options?" "We can surrender and hope they allow us to survive as slaves. We can fight and probably lose, or we can try something that no other species has managed. Which is, we can unite with the other survivors and refugees in this galaxy. The Kethvar have never faced a coordinated resistance of multiple species working together. It's not how they think." General Patricia Wells shook her head. "Jake, you're talking about species that couldn't save themselves. How could they help us?" Amy Carter spoke up. "Because they each have different strengths. The Veltar are natural engineers. The crystal beings can manipulate energy in ways we don't understand. The insect minds can process information faster than any computer. Separately, they were defeated. Together, they might be something the Kethvar have never seen." Admiral Stone looked at the assembled leaders. "It's insane. We'd be betting our entire species on an alliance with aliens we barely know." "The alternative is certain slavery or death," Jake replied. "At least this way we're fighting for something worth saving." The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the decision was unanimous. Earth would prepare for war, but not alone. They would reach out to every survivor, every refugee, every hidden colony in the galaxy. Humanity's message would be simple. The age of the Kethvar was ending, and the age of cooperation was about to begin. But even as Earth began its desperate preparations, the Kethvar Third Hunting Fleet was already moving toward human space. War leader Cosmore commanded 200 ships and 50,000 warriors. He expected the conquest of Earth to take less than a week. Neither side knew that this conflict would reshape the entire galaxy. The message spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Hidden in dead star systems, refugee camps, and forgotten worlds, survivors heard humanity's call. For the first time in centuries, Someone was offering hope instead of surrender. Admiral Kevin Stone stood in the newly built command center beneath the Colorado mountains. 6 months ago, this place had been solid rock. Now it housed the most advanced military planning facility Earth had ever created. Around him, scientists and soldiers worked day and night preparing for a war they couldn't afford to lose. "Report from the shipyards," said Colonel Sam Turner, Earth's new head of military strategy. "We've completed 50 new ships using the designs the Veltar provided. They're not as powerful as Kethvar vessels, but they're fast and hard to track." Dr. Helen Ross looked up from her computer. "The physics team has finished analyzing the captured Kethvar weapons. Their energy systems are incredibly efficient, but they have a weakness. They're designed for single-target precision, not dealing with swarm attacks." "What does that mean for us?" Stone asked. "It means we need to fight like wolves, not lions. Many small attacks instead of one big battle." Across the solar system, Earth's industrial capacity had been converted to war production. Every factory, every shipyard, every research facility was working toward one goal: survival. But humanity wasn't working alone. On the moon, Veltar engineers worked alongside human technicians to design new ship hulls. Their natural understanding of water flow dynamics had led to breakthrough designs that could slip through sensor nets like fish through water. In the asteroid belt, the Shardhai had established a hidden base. These crystal beings communicated through harmonic frequencies that could travel faster than any radio signal. They served as the Alliance's early warning system, watching for Kethvar scouts. The most surprising allies were the Rikaka. These insect-like beings had once controlled hive minds spanning entire star systems. The Kethvar had nearly exterminated them, leaving only scattered survivors. But those survivors retained the ability to process vast amounts of information instantly. Jake Morrison, now promoted to Commodore, met with the Alliance leaders in a secret station hidden in the Kuiper Belt. The station itself was a marvel of cooperation: human engineering, Veltar design, Shardhai energy systems, and Rikaka computational networks all working together. "The Kethvar Third Fleet will arrive in 2 weeks," reported Brightsong through Crystal, the Shardhai representative. Her voice came through harmonic translators as music. 200 ships led by war leader Cosmore. Flowing through depths rippled with concern. Cosmore is known for his brutality. He will not accept surrender. He prefers to make examples. The Rikka delegate, speaking through thousands of small voices that combined into one message, added its analysis. Probability of direct victory 12%. Probability of successful resistance if we employ non-traditional tactics 67%. "What kind of non-traditional tactics?" Jake asked. Amy Carter pulled up a holographic display. "We've been studying Kethvar psychology. They're apex predators who have never faced coordinated pack hunting behavior. They expect enemies to either submit or challenge them directly. We're going to do neither," Sam Turner explained. "We're going to hunt the hunters." The plan they developed was unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of fleets meeting in open battle, the Alliance would use hit-and-run tactics, psychological warfare, and the one thing the Kethvar couldn't understand: willing self-sacrifice for the greater good. Pete Sullivan, now Chief of Engineering for the Alliance fleet, had been working with aliens to develop new technologies. "The Lumha energy beings have taught us how to make our ships appear to be fleeing in panic, while actually leading enemies into traps. The Kethvar instinct is to chase running prey." Lisa Grant had become an expert in alien psychology. Every species the Kethvar conquered fought the same way, trying to prove they were stronger predators. "We're going to fight like prey that's tired of running." Meanwhile, the Kethvar Third Fleet was making its final approach to the Sol system. War leader Cosmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Fang of Dominion. Around him, junior officers prepared for what they expected to be a routine conquest. "Any sign of human fleet movements?" Cosmore asked his tactical officer. "Scattered ships throughout their system, war leader. They appear to be evacuating their civilian population. Typical prey behavior." "And their military?" "Approximately 60 vessels of primitive design. They are retreating toward their homeworld." Cosmore felt satisfaction. This was how conquest was supposed to work. The prey ran, the predator followed, and dominance was established. "Begin the hunt. I want their ships disabled, not destroyed. We need slaves, not debris." But as the Kethvar fleet entered the asteroid belt, they encountered something unexpected. Human ships that seemed to be fleeing suddenly reversed course and attacked, then disappeared again before the Kethvar could respond effectively. Report. Kazmor snarled as another of his ships reported damage. The humans are using the asteroids for cover, War Leader. They attack and then hide behind rocks, cowards. Send fighters to root them out. But when Kethvar fighters pursued the human ships into the asteroid field, they found more than they bargained for. The rocks themselves seemed to come alive as shard-high-energy beings powered hidden weapons. Rikka computational networks predicted Kethvar movements and guided defensive fire with impossible accuracy. For the first time in his career, Kazmor was fighting an enemy that refused to behave like proper prey or proper predators. The humans and their allies fought like something entirely new. On Earth, the preparations were nearly complete. Every major city had been evacuated to underground shelters. The surface had been turned into one massive fortress with hidden weapons and traps covering every approach. But the real preparation was psychological. Humanity had learned something from their alien allies that the Kethvar couldn't understand. True strength came not from individual dominance, but from the willingness to sacrifice for others. Dr. Ross made a final broadcast to the Alliance fleet. Remember, we're not trying to prove we're stronger than them. We're trying to prove that their way of thinking is wrong. Every species in this galaxy has been waiting for someone to show them that cooperation can defeat dominance. As the Kethvar fleet fought its way through the outer system, Kazmor began to feel something he had never experienced before: doubt. These humans and their allies weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to change the rules of the game itself. On his command ship, Jake Morrison watched the tactical display as the battle developed. Green dots representing Alliance ships danced around the red dots of the Kethvar fleet. Each exchange favored the defenders, but barely. "Commodore," Lisa reported, "we're taking heavy casualties, but their advance is slowing. They're starting to group up defensively instead of hunting aggressively." "Good. That means they're starting to think like prey instead of predators." "Phase 2. Amy Carter nodded. "The Veltar civilian ships are in position, broadcasting distress calls on all frequencies. It was the ultimate test of Kethvar psychology. Fake refugee ships were fleeing Earth, calling for help in panicked voices. The Kethvar couldn't resist chasing what appeared to be helpless prey. But these refugee ships led the hunters directly into the killing fields that surrounded Earth itself. As Kazmor's fleet spread out to pursue what they thought were easy targets, they found themselves facing the concentrated firepower of humanity's home defenses. The Battle of Earth was about to begin, and neither side would emerge unchanged. The Battle of Earth began not with a massive fleet engagement, but with confusion. War Leader Kazmor stared at his tactical display in disbelief as his hunters found themselves scattered across the human solar system, chasing targets that vanished like smoke. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. 17 destroyed, 43 damaged, his tactical officer reported. "But War Leader, we haven't actually seen their main fleet yet." Kazmor's claws clicked against his command chair. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had never encountered prey that fought like this. The humans appeared to flee, then struck from unexpected angles. Their alien allies seemed to anticipate every Kethvar move. "Enough games," he snarled. "All ships converge on the 3rd planet. We will crush their homeworld and end this farce." As the Kethvar fleet regrouped and accelerated toward Earth, Jake Morrison prepared for the most desperate gamble in human history. The Alliance had exactly one chance to prove that cooperation could defeat dominance. "All ships. This is Commodore Morrison," he broadcast to the mixed fleet of human, Feltar, Shardhai, Rikika, and Lumha vessels. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to change them. Every Kethvar ship we capture is a victory. Every mind we open to new possibilities is a step toward freedom for the entire galaxy." Lieutenant Commander Kate Williams, commanding the destroyer New York, checked her crew's readiness. Half of her officers were human. The other half were refugees from a dozen different worlds. They had trained together for months, learning to fight as one unit despite their different biologies. "Boarding teams ready?" she asked. Marine Sergeant Tony Martinez nodded. "Ready, Commander. The Rikika have given us real-time intelligence on Kethvar ship layouts. The Veltar engineers have shown us how to disable their weapons without destroying the vessels. We know their weak points." As the Kethvar fleet approached Earth, they encountered the first line of defense, Pete Sullivan's ghost ships. These were automated vessels designed to look like fleeing civilian craft. The Kethvar, unable to resist chasing apparent prey, found themselves drawn into carefully prepared kill zones. But the Ghost's ships did more than just explode. They broadcast the voices of the galaxy's survivors, Veltar children singing songs of their drowned homeworld, Shardhai harmonies that spoke of shattered crystal cities, Rikika memories of burned hive colonies. For the first time, the Kethvar heard the voices of their victims. Some Kethvar warriors found the sounds disturbing. They had been taught that prey existed only to serve predators, but these voices spoke of complex civilizations, of art and culture, and love. Commander Zekthul, monitoring the broadcasts from his ship, felt something crack inside his worldview. War leader, he transmitted to Kazmor. These prey species had advanced cultures. Perhaps we should consider enslaving them rather than destroying them entirely. Weakness, Zekthul, Kazmor replied. Prey is prey. Their thoughts and feelings mean nothing. But doubt was spreading through the Kethvar fleet. The humans and their allies weren't fighting like any prey species they had encountered. They coordinated their attacks with impossible precision. They rescued disabled ships under heavy fire. They shared resources without being ordered to do so. The second phase of Earth's defense began as the Kethvar fleet entered the space between Earth and its moon. Here the Shardhai had prepared their greatest surprise. The crystal beings could manipulate energy in ways that seemed like magic. They began broadcasting harmonic frequencies that interfered with Kethvar neural implants. Suddenly, Kethvar warriors found their enhanced reflexes and tactical computers failing. They were forced to rely on their natural abilities alone, and they discovered that centuries of technological dependence had made them weaker than their ancestors. All ships, emergency frequency change, Kazmor ordered, but it was too late. The Alliance fleet struck while the Kethvar were partially blinded and confused. Kate Williams led the boarding action against the Kethvar heavy cruiser Talon of Victory. Her mixed-species crew moved through the alien ship like water flowing around rocks. Where the Kethvar expected direct confrontation, they found enemies who used teamwork and tactics the Empire had never seen. Cover Team Alpha, Tony Martinez called out as his Marines engaged Kethvar defenders. Remember, we want prisoners, not bodies. The fighting was brutal, but the Alliance forces had advantages the Kethvar couldn't understand. Human soldiers would throw themselves in front of alien teammates without hesitation. Feltar engineers would sacrifice themselves to protect human Marines. The Kethvar, trained for individual combat, couldn't counter coordinated group tactics. In the ship's command center, Kate Williams faced the Kethvar captain in single combat. The alien warrior was faster and stronger, but Kate had something he didn't. She was fighting for something bigger than herself. You fight well for prey, the Kethvar captain hissed as they circled each other. We're not prey, Kate replied, dodging his claws and striking at weak points in his armor. We're partners. The battle turned when Rikika computational networks provided real-time tactical data to every Alliance fighter. The insect minds could process thousands of combat variables instantly and share that information through quantum-entangled communication systems. Suddenly, every human Marine knew exactly where every Kethvar warrior was located, but the real breakthrough came when Alliance forces began capturing Kethvar ships intact. Dr. Amy Carter had developed techniques for forcing the alien warriors to listen to the voices of their victims. Faced with evidence of the civilizations they had destroyed, some Kethvar began to question everything they had been taught. Commander Zekethul was captured when his ship was disabled by a coordinated attack from 6 Alliance vessels. As he was brought before Jake Morrison, he expected torture or execution. Instead, he found something that shattered his understanding of the universe. You fought bravely, Jake told him. Your warriors showed great skill. Zekthul was confused. You honor defeated enemies? We honor all beings who fight for what they believe in, even when we disagree with them. For the next 3 hours, Zekthul was shown recordings of Kethvar conquests, but this time from the perspective of the victims. He saw Veltar families torn apart, Shardhai cities turned to dust, Rikka colonies burned to ash. He heard children crying for parents who would never return. This is what your empire has done, Amy Carter explained gently. Not to defeat enemies in honorable combat, but to destroy entire civilizations for the crime of being different. Zekthul felt his world crumbling. But we are predators. It is the natural order. The strong rule the weak. The strong can choose to protect the weak instead, Jake replied. That's what makes civilization possible. Meanwhile, the battle was reaching its climax. War leader Cosmore had lost half his fleet, and the survivors were being systematically captured or destroyed. But he refused to accept defeat. All ships ramming speed, he ordered. If we cannot conquer these prey, we will at least die as predators. But even this final gesture was turned against him. The Alliance forces scattered before the ramming attack, then closed in on the damaged Kethvar ships. Instead of finishing them off, they began rescue operations, pulling Kethvar survivors from the wreckage. This final act of mercy broke something fundamental in the Kethvar psyche. These prey animals were risking their own lives to save the warriors who had come to enslave them. It was beyond their understanding. As Cosmore's flagship was surrounded by Alliance vessels, he found himself facing a choice no Kethvar had ever confronted. Surrender to creatures who might actually let him live. The message he sent to the Alliance fleet would echo across the galaxy. I do not understand you, but I yield. The Battle of Earth was over, but the real victory was just beginning. For the first time in galactic history, a predator species had been defeated not by greater predators, but by the cooperative effort of former prey. And in the depths of space, hidden sensors belonging to other subjugated worlds had watched the entire battle. The word was already spreading. The age of Kethvar dominance was ending. The news of the Third Fleet's defeat sent shockwaves across the Kethvar Empire. For 3,000 years, no prey species had ever defeated them in open combat. Now, scattered reports spoke of impossible things. Humans who fought to save strangers, prey species working together, Kethvar warriors surrendering rather than dying. Supreme Hierarch Vector stood in his throne room, studying the reports with growing rage. Around him, the bones of 1,000 conquered species seemed to mock him from the walls. How? He roared at the assembled commanders. How did prey defeat predators? Sub-Hierarch Grixtal, his most fanatical follower, stepped forward. Supreme One, the humans have infected our warriors with their weakness. They have made them forget what it means to be Kethvar. But older commanders were beginning to question. War leader Thekvar, veteran of 50 conquests, spoke carefully. Supreme One, perhaps we need to understand these humans better. They use tactics we have never encountered. Tactics. Vector's voice was deadly quiet. Or have our warriors become soft? The truth was more complex than any of them realized. Across Kethvar space, subjugated worlds were beginning to rebel. The defeat of the Third Fleet had done something that centuries of oppression could not. It had given hope to the hopeless. On the water world of Veltaris, the surviving Veltar began sabotaging Kethvar facilities. On the crystal moon of Shardkai, harmonic frequencies disrupted Imperial communications. In the asteroid mining colonies where Rikka slaves had worked for generations, coordinated breakouts began, but the real revolution was happening inside the minds of captured Kethvar warriors. In the prison facilities on Earth's moon, Commander Zekthul was undergoing a transformation that would have been impossible under the old order. Dr. Amy Carter had been working with him for weeks, not through torture or brainwashing, but through simple conversation. She showed him recordings of human history, the wars, the atrocities, but also the gradual learning to cooperate instead of dominate. Your species was not always predators, she explained, sharing data that the Alliance had discovered in captured Kethvar databases. 10,000 years ago, you were prey animals on a world ruled by something even more terrible than what you became. Zekthul stared at the ancient records in disbelief. This is impossible. We have always been the strongest. No, you were the survivors. When the Devourers, the ancient predators who ruled your world, destroyed themselves through constant warfare, your ancestors inherited an empty planet. But you remembered the fear and you decided never to be prey again. So we became predators. You became what you feared most. And in doing so, you created the same cycle of terror that had nearly destroyed you. The revelation shattered something fundamental in Zekthul's worldview. For the first time, he understood that strength and cruelty were not the same thing. Meanwhile, Admiral Kevin Stone was leading a liberation fleet across former Kethvar territory. But unlike the Empire's conquests, this was something new. Liberation without domination. On each world they freed, the Alliance offered the same choice: join the Cooperative Council or remain independent. Either way, they would be protected from future aggression. It was a concept so alien to galactic politics that many species initially refused to believe it. Captain Kate Williams, now commanding the heavy cruiser Independence, led the assault on the Kethvar fortress world of Vorgak. But this was not the kind of assault the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of orbital bombardment, they broadcast surrender terms. "This is Captain Williams of the Galactic Liberation Alliance," she transmitted to the planet below. "We offer amnesty to all Kethvar who renounce the Empire and agree to work toward peaceful coexistence. Resistance will be met with force, but surrender will be met with mercy." Many Kethvar commanders rejected the offer, but others hesitated. The defeat of the Third Fleet had shown them that their empire was not invincible. More importantly, reports from captured warriors spoke of alien concepts: forgiveness, cooperation, the idea that strength could be used to protect rather than dominate. The siege of Vorgak lasted 3 months, not because of fierce resistance but because of constant negotiations. Every day more Kethvar defected to the Alliance. They were led by Commander Zekthul, who had chosen to broadcast messages to his former comrades. "I have seen what we truly are," he said in transmissions that reached across the Empire. "We are not the strong ruling the weak. We are the frightened trying to prevent others from becoming what once terrorized us. But there's another way." The psychological warfare was more effective than any weapon. Kethvar society began to fracture as warriors questioned everything they had been taught. Sub-hierarch Grixtel gathered the most fanatical elements of the Empire for a final assault on Earth. "The humans have poisoned our people with their weakness," he declared. "We will burn their world and restore the proper order." But when his fleet arrived at Earth, they found something unprecedented. Former Kethvar ships fighting alongside human vessels in defense of the planet that had defeated them. The final battle was brief, but decisive. Grixtel's forces, driven by desperate fanaticism, fought with the old tactics of individual dominance and direct assault. They were defeated by coordinated resistance from dozens of species working as one. When Grixtel's flagship was captured, he faced the same choice that had confronted every other Kethvar: accept a new way of thinking or remain trapped in the cycle of violence that was destroying his people. The end of the Kethvar. Empire came not with a massive battle, but with a simple ceremony. Supreme Hierarch Vector, abandoned by most of his commanders and facing rebellion on every world, agreed to negotiations. The meeting took place on a neutral space station that had been built jointly by human and Kethvar engineers working together. Jake Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, sat across from the being who had once ruled half the galaxy. "What do you want from us?" Vector asked, his voice heavy with defeat. "The same thing we want for everyone," Jake replied. "The chance to choose your own path forward." The terms were simple. The Empire would be dissolved, all enslaved species would be freed, and the Kethvar would be offered membership in the new Galactic Cooperation Council. Not as rulers, but as equals. Some Kethvar chose exile, unable to accept a world where they were not dominant. Others, led by Zekthul, began the difficult work of building a new society based on cooperation rather than conquest. The space station, that hosted the peace negotiations, became the permanent headquarters of the Galactic Cooperation Council. Its design reflected its purpose. No single species architecture dominated, and every decision required consensus rather than force. 5 years after the Battle of Earth, Ryan Brooks, the communications officer who had been captured during humanity's first encounter with the Kethvar, stood in a classroom on the station. Before him sat students from dozens of species: human children, young Veltar with their shimmering blue skin, Shard-high crystal formations pulsing with learning harmonics, Rikika juveniles with their cluster minds, and yes, even young Kethvar who had never known the old empire. "Today we're going to talk about the difference between strength and power," he said, activating a holographic display that showed the galaxy as it was now, free, diverse, and more prosperous than it had been in millennia. One of the Kethvar students raised a clawed hand. "Teacher Brooks, my parent sire, says the old ways made us strong. How do we know cooperation is better?" Ryan smiled, remembering his own capture and the fear he had felt. But he also remembered the choice Jake Morrison had made to save strangers, the decision that had changed everything. "Because strength without compassion is just violence waiting to happen," he replied. "And violence only creates more violence. But when beings choose to protect each other instead of dominating each other, they build something that can last forever. He gestured to the viewport, where ships from 100 worlds moved peacefully through space carrying trade, knowledge, and friendship to every corner of the galaxy. This is what real strength looks like, he concluded. Not the ability to destroy, but the courage to protect and build together. Outside the classroom, former enemies worked side by side, building a future that none of them could have imagined alone. The galaxy's age of terror had ended, replaced by something unprecedented, an age of hope. And in the deep space beyond, monitoring stations watched for new threats, defended not by the dominance of one species but by the cooperation of all. The predators had learned to protect instead of consume, and the prey had learned that they were stronger together than any hunter could ever be alone. The galaxy was finally free.